There are three things I want to talk about this week. One of them very briefly, and then the other two a little bit more in depth. First, we'll start with the very brief one, because it will be the topic of my next video. Earlier this week, they took a hatchet to HHS. We've lost people at CDC, NIH. We've lost people at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. It's a bloodbath. I think the count is somewhere around 10,000 people. It's huge. It's a lot. And it's going to be a problem, and we'll talk about that next week. Right now, I'm still gathering data. I'm still trying to figure out exactly where and who have been affected, and to understand the broader consequences, because it's not just that firing, but there's also been a larger reorganization of different parts of the organizations within within HHS, and so it's going to take me a minute. But it's bad. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to talk about is a thing you've probably heard a lot about, and that's tariffs. And I want to talk about them because there is a lot involved in this. And first, I want to talk about what tariffs are. And I know I've mentioned this before, but I'm going to do it again really quickly. So a tariff is essentially a tax that a country levies on goods that are coming into the country from other locations. Now, the way tariffs work is that they are targeted taxes focused on specific industries. And the reason that's done is to protect your own industries in your country. And that's why tariffs are always specific. Why they're supposed to be specific to a commodity or to a specific product or raw material, whatever it is, they're specific. And again, it is to protect your industries in your country. And I'll give you a really good example of this. And we're going to talk about dairy in Canada. So we, in the US, subsidize dairy production and have for a long time. And because of that, our dairy prices are very low. We produce a lot of it. There are years where a bunch of milk is just dumped out onto the ground because they don't have the capacity to dry it or sell it as liquid milk or incorporate it in other products. So the US government pays sort of a premium, not just for the dairy that's produced and sold, but for dairy that is not sold. So it pays based on production. And because of this, the price of our milk is very low. Now, if you're a neighboring country like Canada that has a dairy industry, they cannot compete with the low prices that we can charge for dairy when we sell it. And so what they do is they put a tariff on dairy coming from the United States so that its price is raised, which protects their dairy industry. And there are a couple of reasons you do this. One, because you do in fact want your industries to do better. You want them to survive, not just because of sort of the economic benefit of that, but also because it's a national security thing, right? If you get into a conflict with your neighbor and now they're saying, hey, we're going to make you a state, or they want to try and cut you off from trade, if you don't have production of things in your country, then you just don't have those things when that occurs. And what we find is that they can have positive effects for our country, but only if they're targeted. You can protect a certain commodity or a certain type of manufacturing. And you do that by raising the prices on everything coming in from outside of the country. Now, what we actually have to consider when we use tariffs for this purpose is, does the capacity to make or produce or mine or gather those products that you tariff, does that capacity exist within your own country? Do you have the factories? Do you have the machinery? Do you have the people who are trained to work in those factories or use that machinery? Do you have the capacity to train people to do those things? Do you have the workforce that would allow for it? All of this is what determines whether or not a tariff will actually stimulate the economy within your country. But it does this by raising prices. Now, if you have really low unemployment, as the United States does, then you don't have an active workforce which is ready to be reassigned elsewhere. And because of this, it's harder to train people. Another important thing to note is the way that tariffs get paid. So the person paying the tariff, which is that extra tax on top of the price of the good, is the organization, the group, the company that is bringing it into the country. Not the one that is selling it to that group, but the one bringing it in. So tariffs are paid for by people in your country, the people doing the importing. And these people, like every other group of people who operates businesses, are doing it for financial gain, which means they are extremely unlikely to just eat a 10 to 30% increase in cost that's now going to come out of their margins, which may already be slim. So, by necessity, they will raise the price of the thing they bring in, at least enough to account for tariffs, and then resell it. And so that increases prices of those things domestically. So, tariffs are, in fact, a tax that we pay on goods that are imported whenever we purchase them. Which brings us to the absolute shit show of tariff rates that we are currently seeing that were implemented on Wednesday. Now, it's important to note that the numbers that I'm going to put up in a second are not right. There's a claim made on this graph in the second column, so not the country, but that second column, that says these are the tariffs that they charge the US, adjusted for some other things. And I want to be real clear, that's not what those numbers are. There's no evidence that those numbers come from tariffs. As a matter of fact, all of the prevailing evidence says that what these numbers are is the ratio and percentage of our trade with a country and their trade with us. So these numbers are not tariffs that are being applied to us, to goods we sell outside the country. It's not what they are. It's just a difference in the trade volume between the two countries. Now, this is where you get to the point where we have to again say that Trump is an absolute raging dumbass, because he thinks trade deficit is the same as like a budget deficit. He thinks those are the same thing because he's a fucking idiot. And because of that, he has some sort of hang up on this. But I'll explain what a trade deficit is really quick, because it's really easy. So it seems really bad that this supposed great businessman who's bankrupted a shit ton of companies, not to mention a handful of casinos, that he doesn't know this. So a trade deficit is if I am trading with a partner, say Canada, and we purchase from Canada $100 million per year of goods, and Canada purchases from us $10 million per year. We have a trade deficit with Canada of $90 million, the difference between what we trade with them, what we sell to them, and what they sell to us. And there are a bunch of reasons why the US tends to have a trade deficit with other countries. Now, the main two are that, one, we are primarily a consumer economy. This happened due to free trade and to offshoring of manufacturing, but we are primarily a consumer and service economy. That's what we do. We don't export a bunch of stuff compared to what we bring in. Now, that's reason one. The other reason is because we tend to be larger than most countries that we trade with in terms of people. And because of that, we can buy more items, even if each of us individually is buying the same percentage of imported items as another country like Canada. We have such a larger population. Our population is so much larger that that deficit happens just naturally. It doesn't mean that anything unfair is happening. And to be clear, we've done specific tariffs to protect our industries, just as other countries do. And there's a reason for that to happen. Sometimes you want to protect something that is happening in your country because it's important to you. But this trade deficit that's happening is just a natural consequence of our economy and our size. And so we're taking those numbers, that trade deficit, which I think we're essentially doing is by taking the amount of trade, the amount of things we sell to a country, minus the amount they sell to us, over the amount that we sell to them, I believe. And so this gets us a percentage, which is that tariff that he's calling it. And again, some of these countries do have tariffs on us, on specific products. But what has been implemented is a broad 10% tariff on all imports for everybody. Everybody has at least 10%. And then higher percentages for different countries. Some ridiculously high percentages, and some for countries that don't have people there, which is, good. Now, this is obviously going to hurt the economy. You can see it in the stock market, which has fucking cratered in 2 days. We are now lower than we were a year ago. A year worth of gains in the market has been knocked the fuck out in 2 days by this dipshit's idea of good fiscal policy. So obviously that's going to hurt on its own, but then you have to consider that these countries are now going to tariff us back in response, because it's the economic tool at their disposal to do. So they're going to use those same tools, the tariffs, to hit back at us. And you can't blame them. I mean, shit, we shot first, right? And once those hit, as they did with China, we're going to see the markets go worse. And then not only are things we import going to be more expensive, but we're going to sell less things externally. We're going to do less exports because now people don't want them, because they will have been increased in price. And it's important to remember that even if we could build up our own internal manufacturing base very quickly, which we cannot, which no one really could, even if we could, every bit of resource that we would need externally from us in order to bring that manufacturing back and to build it up will cost more. And if you're a business, Trump has given you no sort of confidence in the stability of what he does. And so you would wait. You wouldn't put money into this and hope that it turned out well. You'll wait. And you then have to consider sort of who this benefits. Well, I mean, Trump is out there saying it's great that he's crashing the market. He thinks this is fucking fine because it won't affect him. No matter how bad it gets, it will not affect him. And so he doesn't give a shit. And you've got all those bootlickers rolling in on Fox News saying, oh, this is great. We need to hurt for a while so that we can be better. Except again, that's really not going to work out that way. Certainly not in the short term, or probably even the long term. Because, again, the reason that we offshored so much of our manufacturing is that it was cheaper there. So if you're saying that we want to do manufacturing here, okay, then that means we have to pay people at least minimum wage. So all of those products are going to go way up in price. And then you won't be able to afford them. So either they're going to make new jobs much lower paying, or we're going to make things here that are going to be so expensive that no one will be able to afford them. And so those factories will close because no one will buy them. Now, this is what I think most economists would call a dog shit plan. And I don't know for sure if there's a more technical term, but it does seem like, garbage. It seems like trash. It seems like it was a bad idea and a bad thing that people probably kept telling him not to do, as evidenced by the fact that he kept delaying and delaying and delaying and delaying and delaying, until eventually he got it in his stupid fucking head that he could do it now. And then he crashes the economy with not crashes, I do want to sort of rein that back in. He harpoons the stock market and then decides he's going to go spend a 4-day weekend at his golf course watching a Saudi golf event, because, I mean, he obviously does not give a shit about us, but I feel like you should know that, right? You know that. You know he doesn't care about you, right? You have to understand that there's no world in which he cares about you. If he did, he wouldn't do all of the bad things that keep hurting you. But here we are. A lot of people voted for him. And you might have voted for him. I don't know you. I mean, I might know you. Who could say? But if you voted for him, you have to understand this is going to hurt you. He has said repeatedly that this will hurt you. And that, after a little pain, you'll be good, but you won't. And so I'm going to talk about why he's doing this. And I'm not in his head, thank God. But why don't we try to figure it out? Because we've got a few options for what might have led to this. First, he has been a proponent of tariffs since I think the 80s. And there's a chance that he genuinely believes that these are some sort of all-purpose tool that no one else has found out about. Kind of like groceries, groceries, a word no one knew, an esoteric word, a crazy word. Dusted off from a fucking tomb by Indiana Jones, the word groceries. That he thinks tariffs are like the same thing, and that no one else has thought of it, and he's doing it, and it's going to be great. Now, I tend to believe it's this one, largely because it just feels like his vibe, right? It's real low info. He doesn't understand what a trade deficit is, so him thinking a tariff works like some sort of magic that other countries pay tariffs is just him being a dumbass, which he has repeatedly shown he is. Here, look at this picture of him staring up into eclipse. Seems like that guy might not be that smart, but that's the first option. Then there's the second thing, which is a little bit more maniacal. And I think if this is the reason, it came from Stephen Miller, actual monster, or Peter Navarro, actual monster. And this option 2, is that tariffs, these blanket tariffs on everything from everyone, provide the president power because he can issue exemptions to tariffs. So if your business is hurting and you want an exemption, why don't you go bend the knee? Why don't you go and grovel? Why don't you go tell him what you can do for him, right? What you can do for his cause, what you can do for his people. Why don't you go tell him that? See if maybe he'll give you an exemption. And I think the evidence to this one largely lies in other actions outside of the tariff arena. And these are things like the attacks on universities, the attacks on law firms, the attacks on media networks. It is an exercise of power to produce capitulation. Again, I think this is the second most likely option. And then there's 3, which I think is pretty far-fetched, but I don't know the logistics behind it, so it might be more feasible than I think. And 3 is that by putting all of this money in tariffs, he has also mentioned he wants a sovereign wealth fund, that by putting all this money in tariffs, the tariff money will somehow go to the sovereign wealth fund, and then that is outside of congressional jurisdiction, and he can spend that as he pleases, and essentially remove the income tax and sort of rule by fiat that way. I don't think that one's terribly likely because I feel like there are too many cogs that have to move in a specific way, and that's not going to happen. But I wanted to list it because I've heard it. I think it's important to note that regardless of the reason, what he's doing is bad for you and for me and for the country and for the global economy as our chances of a recession tick up and up and up. We've already had factory closures because of this. We've already had layoffs that may or may not be temporary because of this in the United States on the day after he announced them. So no, this isn't good. This is bad. You do not have to carry water for someone who is hurting you. You understand that, right? There's no world in which someone keeps hitting you and you have to keep letting them hit you, not only doing that, but being happy about it. Because someone else has to watch you get hurt. And they feel bad about you getting hurt. And so they feel bad because you're getting hurt. And so that makes you feel better about it, right? That's not a thing you have to do. You don't have to be in an abusive relationship with a fucking politician. And so that's where we are with tariffs. Now, I am personally of the opinion that these probably don't get reversed unless he is forced. And that means that the market will have to absolutely crash, way worse than it is now. Or it'll have to hurt the wealthy so much that the rest of the Republican Party removes them. Now, to be clear, this is a power Congress has. The power to levy tariffs and taxes is a congressional power that belongs to Congress. Now, they have given that power to the president in cases of national emergency or for national emergencies. So, what Congress can do is they can say, hey, that emergency you've declared over trade deficits, which again, not an emergency, just sort of more a vibe. Because I feel like the word emergency has to mean something, right? Not everything can be an emergency, because that doesn't make sense. So anyway, Congress can vote to remove that emergency. They can vote to stop it. Now, the shit part about the system is that both the House and the Senate would have to vote to do that. It would then go to the president, who would veto it in this instance. And then it has to go back and get 2/3 in the House and the Senate. Now, do I think it is likely or possible that you can get 2/3 of the House and Senate to vote against Trump in so bold and forward a way? No, not as things currently stand. It seems extremely unlikely, if not impossible. I actually think what would be more likely is them just impeaching him. Because to be clear, you only need a bar. You need to just pass it in the House by one. You need 2/3 in the Senate to impeach, but you only need a simple majority in the House to convict, and then the Senate 2/3 can convict and remove. So I think it would be more likely that he would be impeached than that these tariffs would be removed in that way. I could be wrong. But, that's the option here. He either willingly gives it up because he is forced to by the markets and by the economy, or the Republicans grow a spine, find a spine, pretend they have a spine. At this point, just, I guess, get some raw spaghetti noodles and maybe tape that to their back because it would be doing more work than their current spines, and do something about this. And those are the options. So, tariffs, not great, not gonna be great, and probably gonna be bad. But let's move on to some things that were good about this week. So, I'll start with the Wisconsin State Supreme Court election. In that election, I believe at the time I'm recording this, I don't know if all the votes have been tallied, but last I checked, the Liberal candidate won that election by more than 10 points, which is a pretty big fucking rout. And then you also look at the county by county data, and even counties that voted red, even counties that voted conservative, shifted by a large percentage to the left in this election. Now, this is good for a couple of reasons. These sort of special elections are usually bellwethers for midterm elections. And so when you see that shift, it means that people are not, in a very quantifiable way, people are not sort of okay with what's happening. And you also saw this in the 2 districts in Florida that were up for special election that went Republican, but did lose something like 15 to 20% of the margin they had when Trump won those counties, when Trump won those districts. And again, you weren't going to win in those districts. It's just the math. But shifting it by that much means that any Republican in I only won my seat by 5% or by 8%, when you're seeing deep red counties shift 15 to 20% in the other direction, you got to start thinking about your fucking job. And that's good. They should. Maybe they should do something. The whole spaghetti spine thing at the very least. And so that's good. But we have another piece of good news about that Wisconsin election. Now, if you were paying attention, you'll know that Elon Musk by far put the most individual money into that, some $25 million. And he was using that to not only campaign for the conservative candidate, but also to hold rallies and to pay people to register to sign a petition, and then to pay people to vote I mean, one of them said she was paid to vote $1 million. Both of them seem like plants. I think one was the head of the college Republicans in the state. So it seems like much like that first time he did it in PA, this is also plants. But even with all of his money, his fucking candidate lost by a lot. And so that can tell you a couple of things. One, maybe the electorate in general is seeing the bad things and going, oh shit, this ain't right. I wasn't paying any attention and I voted for Trump and now all this is bad. I got to sort of do something about that, right? It could be that. It could also be that people just don't fucking like him, which is good for two reasons. The first is that he wants so desperately to be liked, as I've discussed before, that anytime he gets rebuffed, I feel like the Grinch when his heart grew 2 sizes. Every time Elon gets just sort of, a very real confirmation that no one likes him, I feel good about myself. I bet he feels bad. And that's great. He deserves that. Totally deserves that. Now, that's part one. Part two is that he has, since he sort of hooked up with Trump, and I'm going to keep using that term because I feel like it probably is somewhat true in some sort of way. Since he hooked up with Trump, one of his biggest points, one of his biggest selling points, one of his biggest sort of promises to the party is that if anyone stepped out of line with old Trump, Elon would finance a primary challenger, finance the challenger against him in the general election, that he would throw his money if you were disobedient to Donald. And when he so publicly throws his money behind something and claims, oh, it'll be the end of the free world if that doesn't win, the future will be screwed if I don't win in Wisconsin, when he says that, and then he loses, takes a little bit of the edge off that threat, doesn't it? So you dump 25 million behind this person and they still lost by a lot? Kind of seems like you funding me might make me less palatable than I already am. And when you are in a +5 district and you are seeing you're seeing a -20 swing out there, and then you think, oh, maybe Elon will help me with re-election, and then you see Wisconsin dropping 10%, shifting hard left. Seems like Elon might be more of a liability. Now, there's been some chatter about maybe his exit will be quicker than we initially thought. I don't really know whether or not to believe that, and I don't really care, because whether or not he's at the head, the people he put in will still do the thing they're doing, and that's bad. But that breakup, that messy breakup, is good for democracy, and it's good for America. I mean, shit, I just want to point out that while he was on stage in Wisconsin wearing a cheese hat, which is, I feel like that's cultural appropriation for Wisconsinites, right? Like, I mean, I'm from the Midwest. I feel like you can't do the cheese hat like that. That just seems, wrong. And so he's on stage, cheese hat, dancing around, and there's some people in the crowd who boo him because, he's garbage. And he goes, oh, look, more of those Soros-funded protesters. My guy, you're literally at a rally where you're paying people to be there and giving away $1 million to have gone and voted. You are everything that George Soros was ever sort of implied to be. And the irony of you saying that while you were on a stage doing the thing is, juicy. Now, I want to point out something that is good for morale. And that was Cory Booker's filibuster. So if you were paying attention, Cory Booker decided he needed to do something different. And so what he did was he filibustered on the Senate floor and prevented any business from happening for just over 25 hours. And he did this by standing up, speaking very, very constantly. There were sort of breaks for people to ask him questions, or long, rambling statement questions to give him a chance to, breathe, wasn't allowed to sit down, wasn't allowed to leave the floor or go to the bathroom. For 25 hours, he was there talking. And I didn't watch all of it because, unlike Cory Booker, I did in fact have to sleep. But there were some parts in there that were extremely moving. There were parts in there that even at 20 hours were inspirational and hopeful and so passionate and emotionally moving. And I feel like what that did was that provided sort of a shot in the arm about how things are going. And because of this, I think it was a good thing to do. Now, was it a stunt? Yeah. Did it, accomplish a lot? In a material sense, no, but sometimes you need morale. Sometimes you need that boost. Sometimes you need people to understand that there are other people out there fighting. And that's what he did, right? That's what that was. He was up there saying, this is wrong. You should know it's wrong. Here are the bad things. Let me read letters from constituents. Let me explain to you what I'm seeing. Let me explain to you why these things are wrong and how they're doing bad things. And through all of that, it was the sort of thing we need. Because what congressional Democrats lack right now is real power. They lack the actual ability to make change. They just don't have the numbers. And since Schumer fucked up the budget resolution, this is where we're at. These sort of acts are the acts we can do that help to energize your base and to let them know that they are not alone. To be able to answer the call about, hey, what can I do for you? What do you need us to do out here for you, Senator, to help you stop this or to fix this? And he answered that question. Protest. Call. Write. Do anything. Because, as I've said, and as he said, if you do something that's more than the nothing you were doing, and it matters, because silence is consent to these things, and we cannot let that happen. We have to be better. We have to do more. And sure, I didn't agree with everything he said. Who would? Shit, if I had to talk for 25 hours straight, first of all, if I could, but then I had to, I'm sure I would say shit I don't agree with. So, yeah. He wasn't perfect. But he was perfect for the moment. And there was a lot of engagement and attention, and that sort of shit is currency now. It truly is. We have so little attention compared to the things that want it and demand it. And to be able to bring these sort of issues to light through that attention is so important. I think the takeaway from this week, other than Donald Trump doesn't know economics, but I feel like if you haven't taken that away prior to this week, that's kind of on you. But the takeaway is that there is hope, because Elon Musk can throw a bunch of money in an election, but that doesn't mean he can win it. Because even though Donald Trump can control a news cycle, we can still break through. And that hope is so important. And that hope is not just now between you and me and other people on the ground, but now we see some of that fight from more of the Democratic Party than we were before. And that's good. That's what we want and what we need and what the country needs. And every bit of that is so important. And again, we have to be the change that we want. We have to be the engine of that change. But it's nice to know that we are not alone in it. It is nice to know that together we have a voice and a presence and a fucking option. We do not have to lose. We can win, and the fight will be long, and it will not be easy. It will be arduous. But it is our fight to win. And so we will, because the other option is not an option. We will win. Now, you're probably watching this on Saturday, because that's when I release these videos, and my views tend to be pretty quick on the front end, and then, a couple might trickle in later in the week. But if you're watching this on Saturday the 5th, and it is early enough, there are a bunch of protests happening, the hands-off protests happening all across the country. Show up, show out. It's probably just a couple hours here or there outside. Show up and be part of something. I know I'll be there. And yeah, make your voice heard. However you have to do that. Because we do not have to lose this. We have to win. And so we're going to. As always, take care of yourself and take care of others. Let's fucking go.